That's a really terrific score, Matthew. And I really love the just the variety and the different approaches and the colors and the space that you leave in the score. Now, having said that, I think we've got some balance problems. Okay, so let's see if we can work some of that out. So, one other thing that I do have to talk about, and that is this is something that you probably noticed yourself in the mock-up. If you listen to the mock-up, that you could probably tell that the celesta really wasn't doing a lot here, and these very delicate little harp harmonics are really getting overwhelmed by everything else, and I don't think you can depend on them. Right? You've got this intense accented pizzicato, an octave higher, or actually, if we intend this to be sounding an octave higher, then then these pizzicatos are going to just completely swallow it, right? So there really isn't a whole lot of a chance with the loudness of everything else going on for the harp or the celesta to play any part, really, and that includes going into this next section right in here, right? So it's what can harp do in against loud scoring? Well, it can play huge rolled chords, and by huge rolled chords, I mean rolled even further than this, and they have to be done in such a way that the pitches that they're covering aren't covered by other instruments, especially trumpets and so on, trumpets and horns, and then glissandos work pretty much with any kind of full texture, and then figuration could possibly work if there isn't a lot of interference from above, right? So if you have sort of kind of stronger middle and lower textures, then the harp can possibly play figuration on top of that. That will be heard, but in this case, there really isn't much of a chance for that. All right, but that's not really the where the work of this score needs to happen, right? So let's use the evaluation criteria to the best advantage. All right. Okay, so starting from the very beginning, pitch weight in the upper middle register of the piano with no pitches below middle C until the end of the passage, right? So in the case of this score, you really do stay with the pitches as scored, and then you start to sort of get bigger and so on and add a few lower pitches here and there. But for the most part, you really do stick with the fairly limited sound picture of the piano score. And I'm just wondering if after maybe seeing a few other evaluations, a few other approaches to this, especially maybe in the website evaluations where it's just this page or this screen over and over again, whether you've gotten any ideas of possibly how to build on this, because we also have to worry about the other concern, which is thematic material repeats often in the piano score, possibly sounding repetitive if orchestrated the same way throughout, right? And for this, I mean, it's for the most part, it's orchestrated the same. Now you've added a couple of touches. You've added your clarinets and bassoons to playing these E fifths. You've added like these horns right in here and so on, but of course, the harp is not going to, the horns, even playing forte to fortissimo on the harp, are just going to absorb. The horns will just absorb everything that the harp is doing here. So, So are these E fifths being added in there enough? Right? Is there like one or two things that you could do, like maybe like just a big downbeat on the timpani every couple of bars? What small touch could you do that would keep it, that would progress the texture, right? So that's so it's not like changing everything that you've done, but it is adding some elements that make that feel like the music is growing, right? rather than just repeating. Okay, so having said that, let's talk about the, the scoring here. How well is it scored? And, here you've got pizzicato, Bs and G sharps, and then flutes and oboes and so on. So I feel that, in this mix, the second flute is really in a weak place, right? Now, A2 flutes on the B is perfectly fine. You've got these G sharps in the middle with the first trumpet, and perhaps that G sharp could be doubled by second oboe or something like that, or not doubled by anything, right? Or just the pizzicato could be enough, because because these E's, like the oboe supporting the E with the trumpet is in a stronger place, but the E in the flute is still fairly weak compared to the power of the trumpet. And then something that you might have noticed in the mock-up, which is also true in the in real life, is that the punch at the beginning here, this bam 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 bum, right? This just punching here on this chord here, this F chord, is enough to obscure the melody here in these other instruments. So it just really doesn't feel all that strong, does it? Right? So you just have to be aware that if you're going to hit this chord hard, then part of the melody is going to disappear on you, right? So maybe there are ways of dealing with this. Maybe not have this accented, byum 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 byum, then just done, byum 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 done, right? Or bring down the volume, like maybe forte. On these forte and no accents might be a way of controlling that. But yeah, you don't want the resonance of the trumpets to just overwhelm what's going on with your oboe and first flute and so on. Now, if this were A2, that would help a lot, right? Instead of this useless F, right? And who's going to hear this F with this third trumpet playing it? Nobody, right? It'll just disappear. Okay, so those are the general problems there. And then, these E's and B's, they're all fine. That's all nice. So no big comments there. There's just one little thing here, and that is does this motive here really go yen dun 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 dun? Is that really what happens there? Or is it bum 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 yeta dun dun bum 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 yeta dun dun? Right? Why does this have to resolve? Yeta dun dun? Right? Why can't it just be its own thing? Biam 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 dun 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 biam 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 dun 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 bum 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 bum. See, because the yun dun 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 dun, the need to go yun dun 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 really distracts from the beginning of the melody here, doesn't it? Yun dun 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 dun. So unless you're going yun dun 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 dun, it just like this note here in the piccolo seems to distract a little bit from the beginning of the melody. But what really is distracting is the power of the trombones and the stopped horns, right? It's just so huge. The overtones from these instruments, as low as they are, right? So this is E above middle C, right? And this is A above middle C, and they're very, very far away from what's happening here in the flutes, but they are enough to really obscure this, both in the mock-up and in real life. Like these bah, 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 bah. These sounds here will be much more captivating to the ear of the listener, much more evident to the ear of the listener than anything that the first flute is doing here. It just really is the forte, it's just not balanced the way it is. So I would say mezzo forte, really bring it back, right? And there's no need to drop down to piano here. You could if you wanted to, right? But just make sure that this is also piano, right? So just everything should be matched. Then here, crescendo to fortissimo. And then this can be fortissimo in its entrance. And then diminuendo, maybe, if you want to. And then we already talked about this. And then, and then it's like, this is more controlled, but still mezzo forte on this first horn. Yeah. Yeah. And then here, I think, with this continuing at fortissimo, and this dropping to forte, that's not, I don't think that works. I think everybody needs to drop to forte, and this needs to drop to mezzo forte, right? Perhaps you just forgot to put in the change of dynamic here. Because, like, right now you've got fortissimo, crescendo to fortissimo, right? So I think you intended to put forte in here. Okay, and that's fine. I like the dynamic shift. I think that is fine. You can put it in here. That's fine. But drop this to mezzo forte. So mezzo forte again. So the concerns about these sections in the criteria are melodic development soaring quite high to the uppermost orchestral register, accompaniment figures covering a wide range, right, of pitches and registers. So you sort of realize these through a number of different ways, and I think that they work pretty well, especially using clarinet. And then that's all great. Now right here, your violinists don't need that, right? This is what they need to see. Okay, and that's also what you need to see when you score, because I'll show you something, right? When you throw an ottava mark over a wind or string part like this, your flute or violin part, let's be honest, those are really the ones that get the ottava marks over them. When you do this, it's almost as if you are removing yourself from the idea of consequences, right? So if you look at this, you could sort of say, oh, well, whatever, ottava over it, and that's no big deal for me as a pianist, right? But when you take away the ottava mark and you score it exactly how it is going to sound, then you are suddenly aware of the fact, in Sibelius, of course, getting the sort of the red colored notes saying that, these are out of range possibly for a student player. And it's not out of range for a professional player, but it has consequences, right? Like the higher you get with the violin, like this kind of the squeakier and perhaps less equally musical as it is to other registers, right? So it's, of course, doubling with the piccolo and so on, that it all works out fine, right? But, there are still things you could do. You could drop this an octave after the A and then have the overtones of the violins do the work of fooling the ear into thinking that they had continued to play alongside the piccolo up here, right? So there's a bunch of different things that you could do. But I really do like the fact that you bring the phrase to an end here and then you drop an octave, right? I think that is exactly what the music needs right in here. Stop. So this is the end of the phrase. And then the next phrase starts here. 2, 3, 1. All right. And then 2 and 3 and 1, 2 and 3 and 1, 2 and 3 and 1. So these are all little daisy chains of phrases, of motives that start on the second beat and end on the first. Right. And perhaps too often I'm seeing people running up to this and starting a new phrase on the downbeat, which I feel is just not exactly what's needed there. Yeah, and I'm not so sure that down, 3 down bows in a row are going to make, and like here, you know what? Don't tell them how to bow their music, right? So I think that if you intend a row of down bows here, then the proper articulation mark is the tenuto mark, right? Because it's like zoom, right? Zoom, 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 right? And then here you're asking them to go zoom on an accented staccato, right? Zoom, I mean, I think just zoom, 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 and then just let the player work it out, because they're going to go down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, or they might decide to go up, down, up, down, up, up, down, up, down, up, right, and then down, up, down, up, down, dot, 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 right. You don't know where the concertmaster is coming from, so don't make their decisions for them there, right? A row of down bows is a specific effect, altalone, right? It's like the Rite of Spring, right? Has got several passages with all down bows for that really kind of zooming emphatic effect, right? But you don't need that here. You don't need to tell the players how to do their bowings. They can work it out for themselves. Okay. So getting to this section, the big concern in the evaluation criteria is, if the upper middle register scoring continues on, will this sound relentless if there's no textural contrast to the previous passage? Well, you do have a textural contrast, right? You're giving yourself space inside these little 4-bar passages. And you're giving yourself a lower note here, this E, which isn't in the original score, and so on. So you are expanding things out, and so that really does help keep things from feeling too trapped there in the middle register. But it still is fairly trebly throughout this entire first page. So those are possibly things to think about, just for the future. Now the final concern for this screen is molto marcato, maintaining the driving staccato, transitioning smoothly into the next passage. Now, I think the transition is smooth. I mean, just even giving us a couple of notes here in the oboe and English horn is good enough. Now, before I change from this page, just a couple of things. I really appreciate the way that you have been fairly careful for the most part to tell me, this is the first player, that's the third player, and so on. First oboe there, two oboes here, and so on. And I really appreciate that attention to detail, right? It's very important. That's great. Now, one little thing right in here is like the downbeat of the next bar is forte, right? And here you have forte crescendo. So forte crescendo forte. Do you remember in the piano score that I had dashed diminuendos here? So you could put in the diminuendo lines, right? So I mean, those dashes are because that's what the pianist does, right? So like it's the interpretation, and those interpretations of the pianist really inform, I feel, or should inform, the orchestrations that we accomplish, because those are the great interpreters of those works. Peter Bradley Fulgoni, who I used in the like for a lot of these, a lot of the backgrounds that you're hearing, and for the example recording and so on. To an extent, I mean, he is his own pianist, and he's a really fine player. But to an extent, his interpretation and the interpretation of many other pianists is based on the interpretation of Alicia de la Rocha, right? Who I also linked in the announcement, and her interpretation may be based on other great Spanish pianists who came before her. So there's that those little nuances, I think, really make a big difference, because she comes back in with a strong mezzo forte, not exactly a forte and not exactly a mezzo forte, right? Maybe a poco forte would be one way of putting it. So and indeed that's what I write in the score, poco forte, right? And of course, that's a dangerous thing to write, because like everybody's idea of what poco forte is different, right? Some people feel that it is poco of the forte, right? Sort of like as in Brahms. So it's and then some people feel it's like, well, it's softer than a mezzo forte, but it's not piano, right? Or mezzo piano. It still has force and so on. And some people feel, well, it's stronger than a mezzo forte, but weaker than a forte. So it's just So it's really subjective, and I mean the only obvious way to really interpret it is how it's used, right? Going on to section B, I feel that you start really powerfully. It's I like the a da 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 dun. It's just very nicely scored with the doubling of oboe and first violins, and these little interior notes here, and I feel that you're addressing some of the concerns, contrast of color and breadth of texture and middle register scoring, right? Because that everything is like really inside that, sort of limited 2.5 octaves of the middle register of the piano. Still, right? We're in the piano score with a few little high notes and so on, and it, for the first 8 bars of section B, it really is kind of still staying limited to the way that it opened. So contrasting color is really, really important. And then maintaining differentiated roles in closely spaced melodies, overlapping accompaniment figures, highlighting inner voices, and so on. I feel you also do that really nicely in some ways that I'll mention in a second. And then there was another concern, keeping high interjecting notes from sounding too glaringly repetitive. And you just do a really great job of that. Like some of the, like you've got like this little note right here. It's almost like a throwaway, but it's nice, and the little pizzicato and so on. So I feel that that's really fun. And then like the second time that it occurs is on the downbeat of the 4th bar right here. And then you turn this into its own thing. This sort of arf arf, sort of like the heavy brass are kind of barking, ruff ruff, right? Okay. There's a little comment here. You do have to mention the number here. It can't just be C trumpet, trombone, trombone, right? So if this is the 3rd trombone or bass trombone, so B, TBN, and then here C TPT period 3, C TPT period 1 and 2, right? You can even do that on 2 separate lines. You could go C TPT and then the second line could say 1 and 2 if you just want to keep the left margin nice and small. Okay, and then horn. If you're using Sibelius and you assign this as an extra bar, then it'll sort of float around and say horn in the middle. And you can do the same thing with the trumpets too, right? Like you could just say C trumpet and sort of be floating in the middle, and then you could do a sub bracket here. Hang on, I'm just going to go to the notations and just add a sub bracket, right? And then it looks really, really nice and spiffy. Okay, so let's stay focused on the scoring. But yeah, that's my favorite part right in here. It's just this, arf, arf. I think that works really, really great. Okay, and then we've got like the melody and then the counter melody replying, right? So first trombone, yeah, and that works pretty good. I just don't know why you're going to. I see you're going to bass clef here because of the A, right? And then the thing is, I mean, if you're going to go all the way up to G though, so just make sure if you extract parts for this that your first bassoon stays in tenor clef. Now, the only thing that I think is a little weird is like the trading off. So if you notice in your mock-up, you can actually hear the trading off between violas and violins and so on. Like the different quality of the pizzicato between the different instruments is different, right? It doesn't have continuity. Now here you have traded off on the C sharp and on the B flat. So why can't you do that the same thing here, like trade off on the E and trade off on the A? Or why can't you just have everything in the violas and both times, right? The violas would be happy to play that. They can do that all day long. It doesn't hurt their fingers. It's fine. just as long as the conductor isn't pushing the tempo too fast. So yeah, so I would say just keep it in one instrument. Don't do the trade-offs, because the trade-offs are really noticeable, right? At least the way that you've got them scored. And then ba 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 da 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 da. That's nice. This is all nice in here. The first violin and the first clarinet taking over in there, and the English horn keeping in the game. That's nice. And then bassoon answering. You know, you could always have bass clarinet answer instead, right? Just to have a contrast, right? See, because you have the contrast of oboe plus first violin to bassoon plus violas, and then here you have clarinet plus first violins. So could there be some other contrast here as well? Okay, now there's one little misconception. I probably should have mentioned this as a pitfall, but this counter melody does not actually end on B. It ends on the triplet. Right? It's it is leading to a very emphatic triplet, and then the melody comes in on top of it, right? It's not turning into the melodic instrument. It's not going ya da 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 be dun da dun, right? It's going ya ba 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 da and as it starts that, the melody instrument comes on top, be, right? So it's a little different from the way that you've scored it. And so, I mean, is that something possibly worth, like you could just switch something for just a bar to, like for instance, if you dropped the first bassoon part onto the bass clarinet, it solves the problem immediately, right? Okay, so did you notice something? That the triplets in here are really weak compared to the horns, right? And the horns are even stronger than the melody, right? I cannot quite hear the melody being played in the first bassoon here. So is a single bassoon strong enough to carry the melody when there's a very prominent horn pad up front? My feeling is that they're not. Okay? I think that you need to rethink these bars. Now, maybe that doesn't mean changing everything, but, it could mean the melody maybe needs to be doubled by strings, or maybe it needs to be doubled by English horn or something. But there's something in here that is just too weak with the melody, the way that it's scored. And what is the problem is the horns, right? They just really are. They're very prominent. They're very strong. They're very loud. You could possibly, the role that the horns are taking here could possibly be taken by the clarinets, right? Like all of these pitches would be reachable by the clarinets, and you'd have that sort of scary, deep, guttural kind of a sound. And of course, brought back, in the dynamics, they just need to be so much softer. And then, as far as the triplets are concerned, the triplets are even weaker. And a lot of people are doing this. They're going da. They're not going da-da-dum, da-da-dum, right? I'm just not really hearing the power of the triplets. Da-da-da, da-da-da, right? Like anybody who has seen a flamenco dance, over and over again, right? Would you score yada, yada, yada? What is that, right? Yada da, da-da-da, da-da-da, ba-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. You know what I mean? It is extremely gestural, right? So I think that this just cuts the nose off when everybody goes yada, 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 right? So I think that the motion of the triplet is really important. And I don't think it's something you can trade off. I don't think you can just go yada in one instrument and go, yada. I don't think that's something that you can divide. I think it has to be one instrument carrying through. Yada dum, yada dum, yada 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 yada. You know what I mean? I think that it really is something that has to be stronger, right? So I just feel that the idea that's in the piano score is not quite being fulfilled by this scoring, right? So I think the horns add a lot here. I think that they're a great idea. You don't need to cut them. You just need to bring them way down and bring the volume way down. I think the idea of the bassoon playing the melody is great. I think it's a great idea, but it's not strong enough yet, right? And I feel that using the bass clarinet and the violas to play the triplets is a great idea, but I think that just doing the first two notes of the triplet rather than the full triplet it's affecting the quality and the statement, right? It just becomes this little pulse behind the music. It doesn't really have the I mean, in the evaluation criteria, I was actually worried that the triplets would overwhelm the melodic line in a lot of these evaluations, and it did in some. But I'm seeing more this sort of approach, right? So please, like, the triplet is the triplet. Just make it say that what it's going to say, right? Would be my, and then that plays against the bum, buppy, bum, bum. You got the da 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 going, da 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 da, right? There's that 2 against 3 thing happening that is so much stronger with the full triplet. So, anyways, sorry, Matthew, I don't mean to just sit here and scold you over and over. That's not my style. But I feel that you are onto a strong idea here. Let's strengthen it, right? Let's strengthen it by making those full triplets. Let's strengthen it by bringing some energy into that melody that overpowers what's going on the horns. Let's keep the horns in the sound picture. They're great, but they shouldn't start off forte. They should start off like, say, maybe mezzo piano, right? And then only just bring them out to shove a little bit at the picture, at the sound picture. See, like in the mix, in the mock-up, see, what is the mock-up here? It says, like, it sees the forte, and it goes down to mezzo forte, and then it goes back up to forte, and then down to mezzo forte, and then back up to mezzo forte, and so on. So, like, the balance here is just way off in terms of what the other instruments can play. A bassoon just has absolutely no ability to balance at forte with very, very close horn scoring, right? So, like, the proximity of the horns is very, very close. Yeah. Now, one last little thing that I'll say is that you're asking your fourth horn to play what is essentially a sounding low E here, right? And while that will come through really nicely, I feel that, like, if you're just going to keep it going for 4 bars and then another 4 bars and something, and then coming back, if there's just some way to double it very, very softly with another instrument, like ideally, like if you had an extra bassoon lying around, it would be perfect. Or you could use like a kind of a soft trombone. Trombone could double that note. Or you could have 2 horns on that low note, right? And then you could have first and second playing this written F sharp and B. But once again, I think you can ditch the key signature here, right? So it's just really not needed at all. Okay, so let's move on to the next section. Now at C, you are taking the advice of the pedal, right? Just that pedal mark, implying that the notes are to be sustained as they go up the piano, as they go up the different instruments that are going to be playing them. Okay, the problem is, though, that you are not really achieving a balance. The way that this is scored, the strings are not going to sound very loud at all, right? And you kind of don't really have them marked systematically, right? Sforzando is not a dynamic marking; it is an accent mark, right? I mean, it can imply a forte, but it's not really a forte, right? Now, right here, of course, as you can hear in the mock-up, the harp is completely eradicated by the sound of the brass, right? So you can just leave the harp out here, or you can have maybe the harp roll, just have them come in on this roll. So the problem here too is that the power of these horns, they're so strong, they're so pungent, especially pushing them all the way up to this F, this written F. that and they're forte diminuendo to what, right? They're so pungent that they are just obliterating this beautiful beginning here, right? Just so beautiful. One thing too, SP as a subito piano, I think that that's great. But if this is going subito piano, then why aren't the horns going, just suddenly going subito piano too? I mean, it's just like there are a lot of things that kind of just don't work in this balance. So, and then pizzicato diminuendo, right? Or you're saying diminuendo for the top, for the upper line of the divisi. Yeah. Okay. So, and then then unison here, right? And so you mean that this will be half of the double basses? So there, I think, yeah. And then I think that you need to sort of mark that, continuing on, yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So here's my suggestion: how to fix this. So our concern here in the evaluation criteria is convincing allargando expansion, right? That's what we want here. Smooth release into bar 49, right? So yeah. See, so there is a change of harmony, right? So couldn't there be, ba 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 ba, right? Could you have a diminuendo mark here to piano or pianissimo, and then diminuendo from that pianissimo? And then, as far as this balance is concerned, could you have like forte strings? Really mark them forte, and then just put accents. Don't worry about the sforzando thing. Just accents. And then have your brass come in a little softer, right? Or fortissimo strings with forte brass. I bet this fortissimo tuba at the bottom is just basically just throwing everything out of balance. Yeah, I mean, so you have like the contrabassoon here, forte, and then suddenly fortissimo tuba that just like is this foghorn, right? So, yeah, so everybody, I would say, keep your brass maybe starting off mezzo forte and then forte coming in here, and then here like fortissimo or forte to fortissimo going up, and then release into piano here. And then I see what you're doing here. You want to sort of like, if you do that, if you can bring your horns down to very, very soft by the beginning of this bar, then you're solving a lot of problems. You don't have to have this pizzicato be forte. It could just be piano, right? And the same thing here with your alto flute. It doesn't have to be forte, and the first flute doesn't have to be forte, and so on. I think it's all fine. I really love the idea of having this high English horn solo. It's nice. I think that this kind of scoring is kind of fussy. I think, I think that works just as well. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's nice when you've got this scoring where there really definitely is a gap. Then it sort of tells the player to breathe, or shows the player where they should breathe a lot clearer than this, right? Than this approach. Okay. So now we're bringing in celesta. Yeah, and like the other thing, like what will horn just completely obliterate is celesta. Now you can mark up the celesta part here. I would say mezzo forte, right? So mezzo forte in both your harp and celesta. You're noticing probably something right in here, and that is that these harmonics are not behaving properly in Sibelius, and that is because they're treating this as a touch 5 harmonic and this is a touch 4 harmonic, right? Rather than these being artificial harmonics that are, that are each separate notes, right? So what you need to do here is you need to add a separate, just in general, right? To avoid confusion, you should have two two harmonic circles. And this is something that I think that the suggestion to Sibelius, anybody out there who has an in on Sibelius and so on, and note performer and everything else, Sibelius should have a function where there's a double harmonic indicated, and then that cancels the touch 5 or touch 4 kind of scoring, right? So if there's a double harmonic, then each of the pitches is just played as a normal harmonic note from the playback, right? From the sound set. And that would just solve a lot of problems, and it's also the proper way to do things, is to have the double. If you have two pitches, each of which are separately supposed to be played as harmonics, then of course you would want the two harmonic nodes, the two harmonic circles. Okay, so I think that it's a very, very cool way of interpreting the accompaniment pattern. And what are the concerns in the criteria? Keep the accompaniment pattern from becoming too regular and too predictable, right? So there's a bit of regularity here in the celesta, but it's I really like these little background notes and and the harmonic scoring and the simplicity of the harp and so on and so forth, right? I think that's all, and then the alto flute as well. I think that all is beautiful and magical, and I think that it's enough to not have to necessarily alter the pattern too much. And of course, the English horn, very high English horn solo. It's it's sort of similar to Rob Roy, like the Berlioz high English horn solo in Rob Roy. So one thing that I sort of miss here is what happens in the piano score. How much listening did you do of the piano score? Sort of, I kind of wonder when I see scoring here that is a little weaker on the there's just that wonderful energy in the left hand, especially of the piano kind of going forward, right? Just kind of really suspenseful. You know what I mean? It just really is this engine that is kind of pushing along in there, right? So I feel that like just kind of defanging it, right? Or just like trading off between the instruments when it's just it's easier for the players to play a pattern, right? Rather than this da 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 da, right? That is harder to do than actually playing 4 16th notes in a row, right? Now, the plus mark here means that's to be plucked by the left hand. I don't think there's any need to do that, right? If you were thinking, well, like we've got this arco, so I'll just give this pizzicato to the left hand so that the player has time to move their bow into position. Don't worry about that at all, right? Because it's going to be down bow, up bow, down bow, up bow. By the time they get to the end of their up bow, the hand will be in the position to just move over to playing pizzicato, right? So there's absolutely zero issue here of having to play this pizzicato with the left hand, to get that open A string. You don't have to do that. It's just easier for the right hand to do it. Yeah, but once again, I just feel like the energy of the 16th notes that are in the left hand, the original left hand score, are just so much more powerful. And it's something that is really a shame to miss here because everything else is just kind of electrifying, right? So we're kind of missing that. You've got You got the stopped horns here, I mean, it would just be so powerful, like, and you have the snare drum, just feel it, there's a sense of lifting energy that would really just completely manifest itself if you restore the way that the left hand pattern goes in the original score. And then these are nice, bum bum, and then you have this. It's kind of funny in the trombones. Okay, and then it's just a light touch here, right? You're going to piano, and then you have this trill, and I mean, it's sort of strange. Like you really are turning up the volume on your flutes and your solo clarinet. Excuse me, and then your strings in here are really soft. So, I mean, I think that it can all be soft. It'll be fine. And then once again, you need if these are two separate notes that you want to sound at these pitches, then give us two harmonic circles. Same thing here, same thing there. And I love the harmonic glissando right in here. That's all really, really cool. Now you can just score this with standard notes with the little harmonic circles over the top too. I think that's just as clear, if not clearer. And then here, like, do you just want this to be like? I mean, it's a little weird. Like here you've got the open D string, and then you have a slide up to the sounding D harmonic, which actually you get by just you're going, and then you just want them to touch the node, right? But I mean, do you want do you want this to be, ba, or do you want it to be ba? Right, so it's a little unclear. I mean, I think like the second way, the really slow slide is just kind of annoying. But I mean, I guess it could work. It's just, Okay, and then, clarinet and so on, a little bit of alto flute. I mean, this all works great. And I like, once again, addressing the sense of variation, keeping the accompaniment pattern from becoming too regular, etc., etc. And then you've kept my my tempo fluctuations in here, which are, of course, reflect what is being played by most pianists. Yeah, I mean, if anything, I would say that, like, the only thing that possibly feels wrong here, right? Because one of our criteria is careful treatment of the melodic voice to make it feel authentic to the composer's style. Would Falla have kept the clarinet solo just going on and on and on, and then made it the main voice right in here? I mean, keeping in mind that this is right across the throat tones, so you get that real kind of barking, hooting sound of those throat tones. It's not the prettiest sound, but I mean, it's still all right. Yeah, but I mean, it's the thing that concerns me more is like there's no sense of conversation in the melody, right? Could there have been? Could you have progressed the texture on the melody, right? So clarinet and then like flute, yeah, da 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 dum, and then maybe English horn, yeah, da 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 dum, and then maybe with strings, yeah, da 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 dum, and then back to solo clarinet, bum 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 ba da dum, bum 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 bum. Are you going A2 here, right? Because like. Oh no, because you've got the quarter rest. But you should still mark this. You should still say 1 on top here, I think, because it's going into such an important solo. So like 1 solo, yeah. Again, just to really make sure. Yeah. So like when the horns and the trumpets build here, the celesta and harp just completely disappear, right? And then this right here is invisible behind the horns. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and then the horns are going to be incredibly powerful here. Ba ba ba, going up to this, high sounding B flat. Yeah, so just watch out for that. Okay, yeah, but I mean, and then these just little muted boops right in here, right? Yeah, but da 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 da. I like that. That's very cool. I don't think you need to separate things out so much. I think that the cellos can easily pluck all the 16th notes if you want them to. I don't think you need to trade off to the violas at all. And this is very, very simple, of course. A couple of open strings and so on. And then I love the snare drum in here. Bum bum bum. And then this is once again very simple. I think it's effective just to take a simple approach here. And the tenuto mark here is, I think that's very well done. And you're giving your first player just a little bit of time to catch their breath, and that's nice. And then here atu, and just adding more and more weight. So yeah, I mean, I like the way that this wraps up and leads into section D. I think that that's really nicely done. And now for our very juicy tutti right in here. All right, there's one little problem. These are supposed to be C sharps, right? Not C natural. All right, so I'm just wondering, like, sometimes I'm seeing some of these errors of notation and so on, or just our pitch. Like an accidental being off or something like that. I'm wondering what was the process of the orchestrator in terms of taking the information that I supplied in the template. Right? Was it a conscious decision to take away the C sharp, or was it did this end up getting copied down? Rather than imported, and then the error was repeated 4 times. I don't understand. Anyways, yeah. So just kind of curious about that. Okay, so yeah, so one of the concerns that I have here, right, in my evaluation criteria is maintaining the rather hallucinatory feeling of the music, despite the fairly straightforward building blocks. Yeah, so it's almost like people have drunken a lot of tequila and they've been dancing and partying, and they're just starting to hallucinate because everything is just getting so big and colorful, and they're starting to see flares, as their eyes move around and so on. And I think that little things like this is something you put into the orchestration, right? This suggestion here, right? You are the person responsible for augmenting things gradually. And as far as this is also concerned, with expansion, that's also your job, right? Not their job, right? You just build it into the music, right? And then they don't need the text, I feel. Okay, I like the portato here. That's very, very cool. That little thing, and I think you should do it in the trumpets too. So whatever the other instruments are doing, the trumpets should also be playing the portato, and yeah. And then if you're doing this, in the violas, then I think that the trombones should do it too. You know what I mean? And then here. Right, so if you're laying off the portato here, then make it uniform, right? There's one other comment here about the bass, and that is what's going on in the actual left hand of the piano score. you know, bum 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 bum, and then slightly lower ba 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 ba, right? So I mean, there is a sense of drama built into this, right? So look, just follow, like, Falla is giving you something, and I think you should follow it, right? So with the way that this is scored, you could easily just bring up your basses, right, to here, and then maybe instead of divisi octaves, you could just have the upper note right here, and then just score this the way that it is, and then drop this an octave, and double basses as they are written here, and then the cello's not playing the octave, but unison on the lower line, right? And then just go back and forth between those two, and then keeping it, you can expand it out. But I see absolutely no reason why the contrabassoon should be playing up here rather than down there, right? I think that if you want the triple octave here, then by golly, you should have contrabassoons doubling this, right? And then you've got, on this lower line, you could have octaves in your bassoons. So second bassoon doubling tuba, doubling divisi lower cellos, right? And then the first bassoon on top. And then you got a beautiful full triple octave there at the end. Okay. So as far as the other elements, just, the da 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 da. Yeah. Yeah, I love the flutes coming in here. That's nice. A second flute being lower here will work here, and it will work here. But then right in here, where you start adding, the trombones start to climb. It's just starting, the second flute being lower is sort of less and less likely. And then finally here, like what does it really contribute to the, I mean, with the second oboe in there, and this, these the emphatic accented trombones, and the second violins coming in here, that second flute might as well just be A2 above, right? Now I really love this, da 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 da, and then da 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 da. That's very, very cool. Yeah, I mean, very cool realization of the melody. Ba 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 da 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 da. Yeah, and then like the trumpets pulling back, and these horns right in here. That's all very, very nicely done, I feel. Yeah. Yeah, see, so I just, I don't have a huge amount of problems with it. It's not, it's sometimes it's hard to get a tutti wrong if you're more or less doing what's in the piano score, in a similar way to how it's written. And this is perfectly fine, going to treble clef here. Right, and now we're getting to the agitato. All right, yeah, bum, bum, bum. So here I feel that the music needs some sort of pausa or comma or something, just a slight lift, so that the reverberation of the hall can settle slightly, right? So you're going pianissimo crescendo to forte, just pow, and then just immediately going into the agitato, the especially of snare drum, timpani, tuba, and so on, especially the lower the instrument too. That will just cover up this slightly softer, right, or much softer from triple F to just F. So you balance things really nicely here, the trumpets and so on, and the clarinets, and this noodling around in here. It's all very, very nice. Okay, and I really like the way that you divided up the parts. However, I just feel like you need a teeny bit of, I would say, just putting in the comma right in here in the system text, so it's across all instruments. Yeah, and this just making sure that these are all eighth notes. right? So yeah, here you've got one quarter note, but generally speaking, just like make sure they're all eighth notes, and then there's like this lift in that right into this. And I would actually put an eighth note here, and then there's the comma, and then there's an eighth note after it, right? Just so that it's really clear that that it's being lifted one into the other, and the same thing here. So yeah, but as to the agitato itself, I feel that that's really beautifully realized. I have, zero problem with that. And then this is really cool in here, the bassoons going back and forth. I think that that's really nice. And then right in here, this, you're slowing down, you're leading into bum pa da 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 dum solo flute, right? So this is nicely done. Now, did you notice something? Kind of a strange acoustic phenomenon. You could barely hear the celesta in there. And the harp itself just seemed to be really easily covered by the strings. So what is that telling you? Strings need to be pianissimo, right? So the strings need to be pianissimo. And like your horns could be triple P. And actually, the flute could just be piano too, with more nuances, right? Da da, then crescendo, da da da, diminuendo, da da, and then crescendo, da. Well, and what is actually here in the piano score? It's portato, isn't it? So just think of this pulse, da, right? As opposed to just da, pulse it. Da, I'll just restore the tenuto marks in here. Then da, and then crescendo, da, da, diminuendo, and then crescendo, ya da da da, diminuendo, crescendo, da 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 da, and then here you can ease off a little bit, right? Da 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 da. This could be mezzo forte in here. All right, so yeah, so I mean, just I think you could just bring down the volume of everything and then bring up the celesta to, say, like mezzo forte, right? The harp and the celesta could both be mezzo forte in there, right? Because you just barely hear the celesta. You have to think, what is the dynamic range of the celesta, right? In the orchestra, like from the softest that a celesta can play to the loudest a celesta can play is from just a tiny bit louder than pianissimo, all the way up to mezzo piano, right? So that is a very limited range of the orchestra's level of dynamics. Now, the celesta itself can play, its pianissimo and its fortissimo, right, are within that scope of the orchestral pianissimo to mezzo piano. So, you would easily be marking this forte, right? And you'll get like a mezzo piano sound compared to the rest of the orchestra. So I think might as well just mark mezzo forte for both parts, and have little crescendos built into this. The player can lean into it a little bit. Now, right in here, we've got these rotating patterns. One of my evaluation criteria was, how to score it in such a way that maintains interest, and I feel that you've done that with the little interjecting lines from the celesta. As to authenticity of style in the melodic voice, I feel just so long as you add some nuances and restore the portato, please, to these phrases, then I feel that you have got. It's actually just on this first one here. The second one doesn't have it, but it's sort of implied, right? Then I feel that is authentic, right? It's not just the choice of instrument, but it's it's how that voice is realized through nuances and everything else. Part of that is the player's job, but you can't leave it all up to them, right? You have to decide how, what is the general shape of the dynamic arcs in each of these little motives, each of these little melody fragments. And this is all cool in here. So one thing I'm a little unsure about is F sharp, F double sharp, right? At the longest that this pitch can last should be a dotted eighth note, right? Don't clash with this. And then right here, this, yeah, so this G natural is enharmonically the F double sharp, right? Yeah. Yeah, bum, 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 bum. That's all good. Right, and then yum, 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 ba-da-da-da-dum. I feel that the melody's just a little underpowered here, like just in the piccolo. You know, what other instrument could play like in octaves with it? I just feel it needs a little bit more strength with the way that it's like here you have the muted trumpets. I think that's brilliant, right? Yeah. But you know, you cannot have your celesta pianissimo, right? Its pianissimo, right, is going to be so much softer than the trumpets. So I would say, you know, just keep them at piano or whatever, right? And same thing for the harp, you know, same thing piano, and then everybody else can be pianissimo. All right, so you're coming from a sense of icy distance, nicely scored, to transitioning from distance to intimacy, right? Horn, very good instrument to do that. Bum, ba-da-da-dum, with its mates, right? And then to suspense, yada-da-dum, very nicely done, with the first bassoon and cello, then going to divisi, pizzicato, plum 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 plum, yeah, da da dum, da da dum. Okay, so here's where we get into trouble here. You know, what is Falla saying? He's saying da da dun, da da dum, right? And it's not enough to just give us this note right in here. I think you really need to have a single instrument. This is similar to the triplets. You have to have one instrument completing the pattern or the little figure. Da da dum. Just really going to the just really just dipping all the way down, right? Rather than just letting go and letting another instrument take over. I don't think that it's enough the way that this is scored. It just feels like two different things, right? Especially bass clarinet being that real individual sound, right? To have the horn take over its sounding E. I don't know how effective that is. I mean, it might be better to have the horn to tie this note going forward or some other instrument. Tie that going forward. And also you've got second clarinet. Maybe it would be better to have the second clarinet tying this and then the bass clarinet continue the pattern, and then meet up with the horn below. I think that might be a better strategy in there. And then the that's very nicely done. Okay, and then you've got your bum bum bum. So one last thing I think you're kind of forgetting in here, and that is since the pianist is going to have their pedal down all the way through here, these pitches don't end, right? They just continue holding. So just continue to tie these flutes forwards. They're all fine the way they're scored, and just have them last the same length as all the way to the end of this bar on an eighth note. And same thing with the celesta. Just have it continue to hold. Plum plum. I don't know why it's dropping an octave, but that doesn't hurt it. It's fine. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're very cool. And it's the same thing with the clarinet. Clarinet should continue to hold. And then like these lovely harmonics and the harp and the pizzicato and everything. That just works really, really great. So, I mean, really excellent score, Matthew. So, as you've been patiently sitting through this evaluation, and I apologize if the process can be excruciating. And I mean, I hope you don't think that I'm unmindful that. It just takes a huge amount of courage, and I don't think that that gets acknowledged enough by some people watching this video. That to send me something and have me pick through it and make suggestions and point out problems and so on and so forth. That just takes a lot of guts, right? It's something that I'm sure a lot of people. I probably would get twice the amount of scores sent to me if they were all private, right? But I mean, maybe then I would lose the people who are into the community aspect of this, right? So if I offered a private and public kind of a thing, I might get a lot more scores, because it just takes a lot of courage to, just to allow your music to be subjected to, that much critique, that much focus and so on. So just saying, I just really respect that courage and that, but the thing that I respect even more is the amount of work that you put into this and the amount of thought and everything else. I've praised some scores before for their sense of proportions, and I feel that that's also a strength here, Matthew. And if things have been missing in the score, and I've sounded a little fretted by it, a little worried, and that's just because I want you to maybe to have those elements be more powerful, so your conception can be more powerful, right? So that like what you have come up with can can fulfill itself even more, right? Very rarely do I think I've almost never have I really had to say in these evaluations, go back to square one, orchestrate this completely differently. It's more that there might be some big fixes, but the big fixes will just make the original idea of the orchestrator work better. That is really what I intend. I'm a builder. I am not a destroyer. I don't believe in breaking people down and building them back in my image. I think that is just a way to make copies of yourself. And I have no desire to do that. So I just have to thank you, Matthew, for the strong work that you did on this and for the support that you are providing for the channel that allows so many thousands of people out there to improve. That is, that never fails to astonish me. Is the generosity that represents, not just to me personally, so that I can continue to do this. I can continue to make the time for this. In addition to all the other stuff I have to do, but also just to all the other composers out there, so that they can also improve and benefit from the resources that I can link to or create or share. So thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Patreon supporters. Thank you, website subscribers, and all the community who is involved with this orchestration challenge, even just viewing it and maybe giving a like or the odd comment here or there, that all matters. And it's all for you to, improve, and for us to interact, and, to share the excitement and this passion that we have of orchestration. So I feel that it's working. I'm seeing so many people improve out there. I'm seeing people who just started with their orchestration a few years ago now getting jobs and, doing a game soundtrack here, or supplying a crossover orchestration there for a pop song or some kind of thing, just like it, or coming out with their own concert music and releasing it and getting it performed. I think that's all just so exciting, and it just makes the community stronger every time one of us gets stronger. So thanks everybody for being part of that, and more evaluations are on the way.